Netcasts you love.
From people you trust.
This is TWiT.
Bandwidth is provided by Cachefly at cachefly.com. This is TWiT Photo with Catherine Hall and Leo Laporte, episode 59, recorded May 29, 2012, the Nordic Light Festival, Part 2. It's time for TWiT Photo. Leo Laporte here. Catherine Hall has the week off. Well, she sort of has the week off. She's not in studio with us, but we're going to see a lot of Catherine because we continue today what we began last week, interviews from our visit to the Nordic Light International Festival of Photography in Kristiansand, Norway. It was an amazing event we went to end of April this year. Catherine and I met some of the best photographers in the world. They mounted small exhibitions for all of them. All of them lectured. It was really a week in heaven. Thanks also to the organizers of the festival, who were just fantastic, and the 200 volunteers who made the festival possible. If you ever get a chance to go to the Nordic Light Festival, you must. NLE.no is their website. Among the photographers we met, in fact became friends with, is a guy named Greg Gorman. Today we're going to have interviews from Greg, Robert Pledge of Contact Press Images, and Mary Ellen Mark, one of the most prestigious and renowned photographers in America. But let's start with Greg Gorman. He's a very well-known Hollywood portrait photographer. His work has appeared in Esquire, GQ, Life, Vogue, Newsweek. A series he did for Interview magazine of people wearing spectacles became one of the most successful and famous ad campaigns of all time, creating some iconic images, including one of Andy Warhol, which you'll see in just a moment. He's also famous for his pictures of Michael Jackson and others, and his nudes, which is his own personal work. He does amazing nudes, one of which is just featured on the Montreux Jazz Festival poster and was quite controversial. Greg lives and works in Hollywood and up here in Mendocino, California, where he gives workshops, one of which someday I deeply hope to attend, because he is truly one of the most inspiring photographers in the business and a master of light. So without any more introduction, let's go to our interview. This is from Kristiansand, Norway, Catherine Hall and Greg Gorman.
So here we are today at the Old Fish Factory, and we are lucky enough to have photographer Greg Gorman with us, who just flew in from Moscow. How are you doing, Greg?
Doing all right.
And what were you doing in Russia?
I had a show at the Lumiere Brothers Center for Photography. It was my first exhibition in Russian.
And how did it go?
Pretty awesome, considering the language barrier, but the pictures worked okay, so we had a good time.
Translates all languages, right?
Hopefully.
So you are known for your dramatic lighting. That's true, correct?
I would assume so.
Yeah. No, the first time you photographed me, it's fascinating. We went into this, I'll never forget it, going into your studio, and there was this window light coming through the skylight, and it was so harsh, and I thought to myself, there's no way this can look good. And I thought, the only person that could make this look good is Greg Gorman. And you put me right in it, and you just angled me just correctly, and it.
Well, you pulled it off. You pulled it off pretty well, because I didn't suspect that you were actually nervous. But
yeah.
I knew you have a great body, and I knew we'd get a great nude.
Thank you.
And with a little reflector here and there, it was pretty easy.
Pretty easy. So, but you work in these incredibly harsh, dramatic lighting. What is your secret to that? How do you know how to position people's faces and features to sort of affect the best of them?
Well, I think a lot of it is just understanding light and shadow, and being able to balance a person's face, looking at a person's face, looking at the certain angles, and figuring out what you want to play up and what you want to play down. So I think it's just a matter of what you put in the highlights and what you keep from people in the shadows.
Yeah, and then is this an intuitive process, or do you have sort of formulas going?
Well, it's not intuitive. I mean, generally prior to a shoot, I spend a little time with the people in makeup and hair and kind of look at angles, see what's working, what's not working, what I want, as I said, play up or play down. And then it's a matter, a little bit of trial and error. Once you get the person, as you know, once we got in there, it was like, well, Catherine, move a little bit this way, arch your back, bring your chin up a little bit more, turn a little bit more this way. Because what most people don't realize is they start directing and they're talking to someone, and I'll say, well, look in the camera when you're taking the picture, when I'm teaching my workshops.
Yeah.
It's people want to sit and they want to direct, and it's really about see exactly what your point of view is through the lens. And that's when we were shooting, I'm looking actually in the lens, and that way it's easier for me to position you.
Yeah, and that's actually a question I had, because I know one of your things is really getting to know your subjects as much as possible beforehand. How are you doing that with celebrities where you know, back in the day, you could spend a day with them or 2 days with them, but now you're lucky to get 20 minutes to a half hour.
It's changed a lot. It's one of the reasons I don't really focus so much on that part of work in my career anymore. But usually the way we did it in the old days is I always have had a chef that I worked with, so we'd always break bread prior to a shoot. And when the shoots would begin, the talent would come in, and if I didn't have a meeting with them prior to the shoot, I'd sit in the hair and makeup room and talk to them during the process. It allows them to get more familiar with me. It breaks down those barriers because celebrities are often more comfortable playing a character other than themselves, and when it comes time to strip that bare of who are they really, they're oftentimes surprisingly more nervous. So to establish a relationship and realize that they understand that I'm there for them and we're working with each other as a team, it makes it a lot easier for them. You have to win their trust and confidence to get a good portrait.
Yeah, and I mean, that's true. They're so used to putting on a face and not allowing themselves to be totally vulnerable. So how are you working with that? How are you bringing out, you know, these images of people that have been photographed so many times and making iconic, original photographs of them and who they are, their souls? What do you do to make someone relax?
Share my vision with them. I think a lot of photographers don't share what they're doing. I mean, in the days of shooting film, I always looked at the Polaroids, would get their opinion. We'd work as a team. I'd make them feel like they were part of a team, not just being a person that's being photographed. And that makes a big difference. If they have an involvement in the shoot and you can create that interest, then you're most likely going to get a better picture.
And do you ever feel that sometimes they see it and it ever hurts you as an artist? Like they see the image and then, you know, maybe they get self-conscious or they're not. Does it ever work the other way?
Sometimes, but most of the people, surprisingly, that don't want to see the pictures will tell you in advance. Kim Basinger never wanted to see a Polaroid, never wanted to see a picture, and you talk about a beautiful woman. Jessica Lange did two of the greatest beauties I ever photographed. Neither of them really liked to, didn't want to see what, they trusted me, so they didn't really want to see what was going on during the process.
Yeah, so you just ask in advance.
And then someone like Bette Midler, she'll look at every Polaroid and she'll shoot for 10 hours, and at the 15th hour, let's say, she'll look and she goes, oh, I really look like hell, this shoot's over. And so, you know, she'll know, she'll get to a certain point, and then it's like, okay, we're done.
That's great. So you created so many iconic images. A couple of ones that I want to touch on is the Andy Warhol image. How did that come about?
That's actually a great story, Catherine, because I was shooting a campaign for many years, for 30 years as a matter of fact, for LA Eyeworks, a small eyeglass company in Los Angeles. And every month, the celebrities would appear in Interview magazine, which is Andy's magazine. And at the point in time, Andy actually signed a contract with Ford Models to actually model for them. He called me and said, would I think that LA Eyeworks would be interested in using him as a model for their campaign? And I said, well, I think so. And I called, and I knew Andy because I'd worked for him with the magazine for many years in the 80s and 90s, and actually in the 80s. And then we called and we did the ad, and who knew that, you know, at that point in time when I was shooting an ad that it would become one of my most iconic images.
Yeah, and for him, he uses it for, I mean, now that he's passed, but it's been used in his memory.
It's part of his collection at the museum. It's the main picture used for the foundation,
And, you know, it's interesting to me because I think, do you know when you've captured these images? I mean, is it afterwards this could be iconic, or while you're shooting it, or when does it click?
Usually at the time I'm shooting it, I'm feeling I'm getting maybe something good, but you really don't know until time tells whether the image is going to become an iconic image or not. And shooting someone like Andy, for me, was just such a great opportunity. We've known each other socially and through a working environment, but to actually photograph him, I didn't think about it so much at the time. But, you know, after it was over and after the pictures were published and we saw it a lot of times and it kept being used for a lot of things, I realized it was an important image for me.
Does it wear off? I mean, Andy Warhol calling you, Michael Jackson calling you. Do you still get, oh my gosh, this is Andy Warhol calling me, or is it just kind of, they're everyone's people and you just...
You know, when it's your profession, you don't really think about it so much.
Oh.
I guess that lets us know we're in the, by the fish factory.
We are really in the fish factory.
I think that, you know, in your career, when my career was really taking off in the 80s, it happened so fast that you don't really have time to think about it. You're just going from point A to point B, and you're there, and you're pulling out the cameras, and you're shooting. But, you know, in the beginning, when you start out in your career, in any career, you know, you're very excited and moved by all the people you shoot. After a while, I don't think it's so much that you get jaded, you just get used to that's what you do for a living. I think where it actually hit me the most, where I realized, was because so many of these people have become friends of mine in real life, and I have house guests that will come in to stay with me from out of town, and they'll walk in and there's John Hurt or Debbie Harry sitting on the couch, and they're like, you know, I'm not thinking about it because those are my friends or my house guests, and my friends will come over and they're like having shock theater to see these people. To me, it's kind of second nature. It's just what I've always done for my life and my career.
Yeah, that's how I felt when I stayed at your house. There was just artwork everywhere, and I think, I forget who in the guest room, there's a portrait of someone that's very famous, and I'm laying down in bed and I'm thinking, wow, this person, who was it next to me?
Well, actually, I think the Andy Warhol portrait's in the downstairs bedroom.
Well, thinking, I can't believe I'm sleeping next to him, you know? But speaking of being jaded, I think, everyone knows Hollywood. It's a hard place to survive and kind of keep your soul, if you will. One of my favorite stories of yours, when you were talking about Michael Jackson and how you had a great relationship with him, you photographed him a lot. And I thought it was very interesting that you have a lot of unseen images of him. And when he passed, they could have been quite lucrative.
Right.
But of course, in your personality, you kept them private and you didn't release them into the world. How do you stay?
It's the same reason that, people say, oh, Greg, you should really write a tell-all book about your life and all the people. And, those are kind of great memories for me, and they're personal memories. And, I just think so many people take everything to exploit it to the 9th degree, and I just don't see a need for it. It's enough already. Michael was great, and we worked together many times, and we had a lot of great stories and a lot of fun experiences and did a lot of great pictures that never even saw the light of day. But to exploit someone after their death, I think, is kind of pointless.
Yeah, yeah. And then can you actually tell us about the image? One of the ones that I have is quite iconic, is with the tarantula on his face. How did that one come to be?
Well, one of the great things about Michael would always call me prior to our shoot, like about 2 weeks out before we do a shoot. He'd call me, and we'd have like a 2-hour discussion on the phone about what we were going to shoot. Just like an art director. We would go into a shoot, I knew exactly what the day was, how the day would unfold and what we were going to do. One of the early pictures I did of him with the veil, with the kind of like the glorious thing, that was a totally planned photograph. The spider thing, Michael said that he had some pet tarantulas and that they had actually molded, they shed their skin much like a snake, and it looks exactly like the tarantula. It's the whole thing. And so he brought one of the skins of one of the tarantulas, and we actually just taped it to his to the side of his forehead for the photograph. So that's kind of how that came about.
It's an amazing shot. What about another one? What's another one of your favorite photographs?
I love the portrait of Jaimin screaming, which is, he's such a great actor. What's ironic about the photograph is that I photographed Jaimin many times. He was a very big model at Herb Ritts and Bruce Weber, and all of us shot many times. Beautiful skin, that kind of purple-black skin. I did lots of nudes and lots of portraits. And I did that shot with him with a mud mask. And I thought, I'm going to put it on my 3rd book for the cover, because I thought I don't want to put a celebrity on the cover of the book, because then someone else is going to be miffed that they didn't get the cover of the book, and it was primarily a book of personalities.
Of course.
And at that point, Jaimin had just done his first movie, and as you know, Jaimin Hansu's gone on to be a terrific actor in our country. So it's kind of wild that he was a relatively unknown actor at the point in time that he was on the cover of that book.
Yeah, and that's one thing that I've noticed. You photographed a lot of the stars before they became famous. How did you know? How did you seek them out, or did they come to you, or?
It was funny. I was just very fortunate, because at a point in time when I had my 15 minutes of fame, and so it was like in the 80s and 90s when I was working every day and shooting, and I was kind of like the new kid on the block getting everybody. They all came to me to shoot because it was the beginning of their career. My career was already taking off, and I was just fortunate enough to have the opportunity to shoot so many of them at the early stages in their career. Yeah,
there's beautiful Leonardo DiCaprio. There's so many of those images that are just...
There's a lot of the kids when they were really young, yeah.
What's the difference when you're photographing them new versus, as they've progressed and become so used to being in front of the camera?
Well, I think they become certainly a little more aware of their image, jaded to a certain degree. I think one of the things in the book that I published called In Their Youth was, I think the most striking common denominator of that book with all the young actors is that I had them at a point in time where their whole image, per se, was being formed, and they were open, more accessible, definitely more vulnerable, and I think the pictures have a certain honesty to them that as their careers take off, as their image becomes more solidified in the public eye, they are more aware of what they're willing to give and project in front of a camera, as compared to then, they were willing to take more chances.
So how do you pull that out of them? Even, as they progress and it becomes more difficult?
Well, it's easier with people that I've worked with over the years because they trust me. One of the things I've always shared the editing experience with the talent, and that makes them a lot more comfortable. That's why I never was really a major photojournalist, even in shooting celebrities, because magazines knew that my relationship with the talent was always, to me, more important than my magazine relationships, because they would want those vulnerable, askew, kind of off-kilter pictures. And I figured it's the talent's time as much as it is my time. And so for me, I want them to be happy with the pictures. That doesn't mean I will sacrifice a picture to have a saccharine image, but at the same time, I want to have an image that they respects who they are and their integrity as well as my own.
Yeah, definitely. When you're shooting, I know that one of your signatures is the shadows being so rich and dark, and just you're not afraid of the dark. You're not afraid to go back. You're not afraid. You evoke that mystery that comes from it. What allowed you to come to a place where you said, you know what, screw it, I don't care about details and shadows?
Well, I think it was really very, very early on in my career, and I really have to credit my very first assistant, who was a guy named David Jacobson, who's now running a bar in Thailand, but who was a great photographer. And a lot of the early work that I created for Interview Magazine at the early part of my career, where Andy and the people that ran the magazine would allow us to do whatever we wanted. We would turn in 5 pictures, we'd shoot a star, and whatever we turned in, that's what ran. I just lit with kind of more irreverent disregard for too much information. You know?
Yeah.
I had enough information to basically identify the person and tell you something about them. But for me, pictures oftentimes are more successful when they don't always answer all the questions, but leave something to the imagination. So that interplay of shadow and light, and I think partially because my degree is in cinematography, believe it or not.
Oh, really?
And I was such a huge fan of Ingmar Bergman. So, you know, watching his movies and certainly influenced how I light and how I shoot.
Yeah, and then actually, I know you do a lot of workshops at your beautiful home in Mendocino, which I've been fortunate enough to go to. What do you find is, for emerging photographers out there, the biggest challenge when it comes to using light?
Well, I think one, to be able to see and understand light. I mean, I think the 2 things that I focus on in the workshops is to basically teach people how to see light and how to communicate with the talent, how to connect with the talent so they can get the picture, but to understand light. I mean, today, you know, I mean, you're even young for someone like myself. I started out with, you know, nothing was automatic. Everything was manually set. So when they come and take workshops with me, everything is put on manual. Everybody has to take a light reading. Everything today is so easy. Everything's automatic, auto exposure, auto everything. And so people can take a picture, they'll get a great picture, but if they'll be hard pressed to repeat that again, you know, and so basically it's just being able to understand and see light.
So you think taking the technology back actually helps you to see light?
Well, I think you can't shoot a camera on automatic and understand light. You know, it doesn't work that way. If that's your introduction into the world of photography, it may be a good introduction in terms that it gets you passionate about learning about photography, but you really need to strip that bare and learn how to work with a single point light source and then build on that by adding or subtracting light. And that's really how I kind of teach.
Yeah, definitely. Anything else that you see that your students come across that are particularly challenging?
Well, I think it's just understanding light, and that's the most important thing. I mean, I think you have to really be able to understand light, understand a person's face, being able to look at someone and kind of analyze what the strong points are, what the weak points are, where to put the camera, what height to have the camera, what lens to use, you know, what sort of light to use. I mean, you know, there's so many different types of lighting that work and are adaptable for different faces. It's just being able to put all those elements together and make it work for the person that you're photographing. So you've transitioned. You're doing all the celebrity work now, and now you're drinking more wine and relaxing a lot more, and you're teaching. Turning into a chronic alcoholic.
What's
next? No, making wine. You know, for me, in terms of my life career, it's really always been about passion. And my passion in terms of photography, in terms of how I built my career, is pretty much gone. It's just not there anymore. I'm still very passionate about photography, but I'm more passionate about shooting pictures for myself personally. The celebrity work it just doesn't hold any interest for me anymore. And I think if you're not passionate about something, it's hard to be really good at what you're doing. And I've been passionate about wine, per se, since the 70s. And so it's something I'm pursuing. And the teaching is great, because the teaching gives me a chance to give back something for which I've gotten so much out of. And that I get very passionate about. When I'll get somebody in the class, and I'll have a class of 7 or 8 students, and always there's like maybe one person or two, not always, but when that workshop happens and I see the lights go on upstairs at the end of the week, it's awesome. I mean, and when that happens, it's incredible. And that, to me, is so fulfilling. Yeah,
and then speaking of passion, I want to conclude our interview today. You know, I think you've been really amazing at doing this, just emphasizing the importance of personal projects. Why do you think, I know you do with all your nudes and all the work that you've done over your career, if for emerging photographers out there, why is it important, if you want to do photography for the long term, to have personal projects?
Well, it's really important, and it's a great question to actually end on, because to backtrack a little bit to tell you a story, in the early 80s when my career was really taking off and I was shooting motion picture campaigns for like Tootsie and The Big Chill and Scarface and all these movies, and everything, I was kind of on top of the world, and my career was going, and I was so excited. I was early 30s. I was in New York, and I saw a dear friend of mine, Antonio Lopez, who was a great fashion illustrator. And he said, well, Greg, that's great that you're taking all these pictures and shooting all these people, but what are you doing for you? And it just stopped me cold in my tracks. I realized I was just a hired gun. I was a work for hire. And I wasn't creating any images that were images that belonged to me, that were, you know, images that came from inside of me. And so that's when I actually started doing my nudes. That's when I gave myself this kind of self-imposed assignment. And I think if you want to have a long career in anything you do, that you have to be able to separate the commercial work from the private work. And the private work is what is going to drive you and keep you motivated. The commercial work is what is going to fund your private work.
And I'm sure you find that your personal work makes your commercial work better and vice versa.
Absolutely.
Definitely.
Absolutely.
Well, thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks so much for having me.
And we're excited to conclude this episode, or this section of TWiT Photo in the Old Fish Factory, and we're looking forward to the next one.
Thanks.
All right. Have a good rest of your festival.
All right. You too.
Catherine Hall and celebrity photographer Greg Gorman, who really was a great guy and brought some of his wine. Just a few bottles, so only a few of us got to taste it, but it was quite good. If you get a chance to see any of his books, he's fantastic. And his website tells you about the workshops he does up in his Mendocino beach home, which I hear are fantastic. We are giving you some interviews that we did in Norway a couple of weeks ago when Catherine and I went to Kristiansund for the Nordic Light International Festival of Photography. Just a little behind-the-scenes production note. Ryan Marsh, who's in our chat room and does lighting here for us, went to Norway also and did the lighting for those interviews. One of the reasons they look so great. He really did a great job. Also, thanks to Odd Inga, who found us some great locations, including that old fish factory. Kristiansund's famous for its dried fish, its klippfish. And also, they were shot on pretty good cameras. We had, for the single shots, Canon 5D Mark II and a Mark III. One of the lenses is a f/85 or f/85 millimeter f1.2 lens. I'm not sure what lens Catherine was using on her camera, but that does make a big difference having that depth of field. And then the two-shot using a Panasonic, professional-grade Panasonic video camera, which made some of the color balancing a little challenge. But Tony Wang did a fantastic job of making those shots match. Our next interview is one I did in a coffee factory, a coffee roastery, also in Kristiansund, with Robert Pledge, who was born in London, raised in Paris, worked for a long time as a photo editor for Magnum, Gamma, one of the premier photo agencies. In 1976, he founded his own photo agency, the very famous Contact Press Images with photographer David Burnett, and some of the most iconic images of the fall of Saigon, 9/11, the first Iraq War came from Contact Press Images. He mounted an exhibit at Nordic Light that was incredible of his contact sheets, because in the early days, pre-digital days, when a photographer shot a roll of film, they would take the negatives and make a single print of all of the negatives on a contact sheet. The photo editor would then go through the small images, circling in grease pencil the ones that he wanted to use. That's what Robert Pledge did, a master photo editor, picking some of the most well-known news images of the last few decades. But it was fun to see the exhibit, and I think this was Robert's intent, because you could see the context, you could see what the photographer was thinking, and the shots they got. You could also see how many great shots there were and what a challenge it is as a photo editor to pick the shot. Sometimes counterintuitively, but always with perfect precision. Robert Pledge is quite an inspiration. One of the first things I asked Robert is where he got the idea for this amazing exhibit using contact sheets. We're at, what is it, Folk Bar?
Folk Bar.
Folk Bar.
Yes, I think.
We got Odd Inga saying in the distance, Folk Bar, it's a Folk Bar. It's a coffee roastery and, I think, maker, because somebody made this, unless we brought it in a thermos.
And a coffee drinking place.
Cheers. Skull.
Skull, yes.
Prosta. Prosta. So, Robert Pledge, are you a photographer as well as kind of a photo agency?
No.
You don't take pictures yourself?
I've never taken pictures.
But yet you judge and you teach?
I do have a little camera because people have insisted that I take pictures of the exhibitions I hang so they can put a few pictures up on the website. So that's the only time I take a few out-of-focus pictures.
And yet you have, in this exhibit you're doing here, is both heart-rending and fascinating. When did you get the idea to show the contact sheets as well as the final shots?
A dozen years ago, that was a dream, and I still plan to do a book that will be focused on and around contact sheets. The contact sheet is something so fundamental in photography of the 20th century. In the digital age, it's totally irrelevant, but in those days, it had meaning, and that's what I wanted to do. But I had to find a place to do it. One, people say, no, you don't show contacts. You know, we photographers were not inclined to do that.
They didn't want to show their outtakes.
They don't want to. They want to show the great pictures, the iconic pictures.
And yet, when you see the context, and there are so many wonderful images. Sometimes what I was impressed by is how good the photo editors are, because to pick one out of those.
Yes. Well, and those are the images that were picked then, when the images were made. Today, one might look at them and pull out other things. Yeah. But it's also interesting to notice that some of the contact sheets have a lot of bad pictures, and all of a sudden one just pops out. Yeah. Boom, like a little star in the sky out of nowhere, and that is extraordinary. But the thing is that these contact sheets say even more than what we see there, because, in effect, they represent the work by 15 photographers, I think, on
some of the best photojournalists ever.
And some great people like Don McCullin, David Burnett, Annie Leibovitz, Gilles Caron, Li Jianchen, a Chinese photographer, Dilip Mehta from India, and others. But they all have different styles of working. And some only shoot in one format, others in two. So they are working with two cameras in that case. And they switch from 35mm black and white to 2 1/4 black and white, or color, or vice versa.
The pictures of the Sandinista rebels, for instance, in Somoza's gym, he did it twice. Once,
and in that case, we're speaking of Kodachrome, slide film. So photographers were more schizophrenic than they are today, and you can look at a contact sheet and understand quite well when the photographer was operating in the 70s, 80s, just because of the way the contact sheet is built. If it's broken up and it seems a little erratic, it's because the photographer is working with a couple or more cameras. Those who are just very focused, like Patrick Artignan, there's a contact sheet, or Annie Leibovitz in Rwanda, the contact sheet is very, very consistent, coherent, and solid. You know that the photographer is working with one camera. Today, this is irrelevant because photographers work with one camera, and it's color and black and white, and they're not concerned about the limitations of 12 images for medium format or 36 for 35mm. They just shoot. But they do something else that is incredibly strange to people like myself and the older generation, is that they do not shoot with in a totally consistent way. They interrupt all the time their image making by looking at the images on the screen behind the camera, and they miss so many great images by the same token. There's not the same level of anxiety that presided over the making of the images we see in these contact sheets, where the photographer is shooting without any knowledge of how good or bad the image might be. And an image one might only see 2 or 3 or 4 weeks down the road. Don McCullin, for instance, he would shoot, then he would carry his film back with him to London, he would process himself, and then start looking at the images. Not even from a contact sheet. He would do it from the negatives.
And knowing that, when you look now at these contact sheets, this is a historical record. I mean, it's fascinating.
Absolutely.
Of not only at the time, you go back to Vietnam Hue, in Vietnam, 1967, that probably
68,
was. 68.
Yes.
And then all the way up to the Olympics, and the Olympic swimmer pictures. It's very interesting to watch.
David Burnett.
Yeah.
Yes, incredible.
And to look at, you also see the editor's choices, which are fascinating. And in fact, that's a good example, because the choice is a brilliant photo, and his arm is kind of akimbo and a little bit blurry. And at first you might say, well, that's not the perfect image in that set, but it is the most expressive image in the set.
Well, now you're flattering me, because every image that's in there, except maybe for one, I've edited at the time over those 40 years.
Well, it's fun to watch your work, I got to tell you. I didn't know that, but it's really fun.
You don't have to be a photographer to be totally immersed.
You have the eye.
Sucked into. Well, it's the eye. It's the eye. It's the brain, and it's the heart. As Cartier-Bresson said, the perfect image is when the decisive moment, and the perfect image is when the eye, the mind, the brain, and the heart are in perfect alignment. It's a formula, but there's some truth to it, and I think editing is no different. Editing is taking pictures that already exist. The reality are the photographs that then you observe and you select from. It's just a similar replication of the same process, but from a different set of raw materials.
And that's what's fun about this exhibit is we see the raw materials,
yes,
which we never see normally, and
yeah.
but it does celebrate your work as well. How do you know when you look at you're looking at a contact sheet which might have 30, 40 images on it? How do you is it a feeling? How do you know that when you find the right one?
Well, yes, there's a feeling. You have a sense that this image says something, that it has an interesting form, shape, composition of some kind, that there's something aesthetically, even if it doesn't respond perfectly to the accepted formulas.
Well, the diving one is a perfect example.
There's something.
It's very dramatic, though.
The thing, I've worked with the same photographers over and over, and year after year, so you get to know them very well.
Right.
And you get to look in a different way. Your eye digs into the image deeper, and I try always and understand what was the photographer trying to do? Why was he positioning himself? Why was he looking with such intensity? Why did he shoot very fast this and move on to something else? Why all these things? So it's asking questions. I'm a journalist. I ask questions.
You're having a conversation
with myself.
Yeah.
And then with the photographs, and indirectly with the photographer, because the photographer, I used to speak on the phone. No emailing. No emailing. That's a huge difference. No cell phones really until the end of the last century, and so it was on the phone. Burnett calling from Iran in the middle of the night and saying, there was this rally. I went there. I took a few pictures. I don't think they're great. There might be one. In color and black and white. Just watch out for it. So of course, when a week later or 3 days later, whenever the film would come in, and it could be quite late because the color was shot on Kodachrome most often. It had to be sent to Fairlawn, New Jersey, or to some other place. That would take an additional 48 hours, and we'd miss so many deadlines because of this. But it was always a choice. Do we meet the deadline, or do we make images for history?
Yeah.
And it was always for history.
Yeah.
So we've missed a lot of deadlines, but I'm so happy about it because we do now have things that have this value. So he would call and bring attention to certain things, then I would look for them. And as I would be looking for them, I would find other things along the way.
So you're on the phone, and he'll say, look for this image.
Yes.
You're thinking about that when you're looking at the context.
I'm thinking about that.
But it may be weeks later.
It could be, but then you read. That's the other thing. If you're an editor, you read. You read the newspaper, you watch the television programs. Today you go on the internet.
You're looking to tell the story.
I'm trying to understand.
Yeah.
I can't tell a story if I don't understand.
Yeah.
So I first have to understand.
Yeah.
To understand, I had to look. I had to dig in. It's like a puzzle. There's what the photographer might have said if we were in touch. It's what your own knowledge might be of a given situation. It's what you've read, what you've accumulated, what your little computer up there puts it together. And then there's your own feelings, sensitivities, and your ideas about what a good picture. But there's also, because these images were marked at that time, it is what seemed relevant at that time.
So coming back now, would you do sometimes something different?
I've looked very carefully. There are very few photographs, I think, that I missed. I don't think I
think you're right. Because looking at the exhibit, I think one of the fun things for the viewer is to look at every contact sheet and to understand your process a little bit retroactively. And I think every one I looked at, as I looked through it, that's nice as, you could see why you chose that image.
And sometimes, actually, there's a sequence that is of no real interest. It's sort of banal, it's flat, it doesn't mean much at first, and then something, because the photographer is...
They're working on it.
He's like the hunter.
Yeah.
He's looking and waiting for that bird to pop up in the sky before... maybe that's a bad formula. I mean,
the
because
pictures,
they're animal lovers.
The pictures, I'm not sure where they're from, of the boy soldiers and their prisoners. That was a very interesting sequence, because you're right. There's some banal. I mean, none of it's banal because it's so serious, the story. The Congo,
yes.
That's right.
Yes. That was in 1964, 65, Don McCullin.
Oh, amazing images.
Yes, you look at the sequence. So actually, this kind of contact sheet, furthermore, because there's another dimension to it, which is the kinds of questions it raises. And these are ethical issues.
Huge.
And others that say, well, is this done for the photographer? Is it done for photography? Are these people aware? Are they manipulating you or not? Or will they be doing that anyhow? And this question comes back regularly. I mean, it's very clear when you look at Don McCullin's Congo sequence. These soldiers who are not really well trained, you know, they might actually hate these guys because there are tribal differences. They were the Belgian colonial powers sort of mounted one against. There are multiple of reasons behind it. I mean, there's some ideological ones too, because those who were arrested were supporters of the leftist pro-movement, Lumumba, Patrice Lumumba. The others were being paid by Kasuvubu and whatever. So they want to get rid of the enemy, and they were taunting them and maybe just taking advantage of the photographer there so that they could say, yes, it really happened. You know, we didn't just kill them, which they would have done anyhow, most likely.
Right.
But those are questions that photographers have to deal with also all the time. Do you take the picture?
Right.
There's a sequence which we don't have here, but I've dealt with, which is a very famous sequence, which won a Pulitzer Prize for Michel Laurent and Horst Fast, taken in 1971 in Bangladesh, when these collaborators were arrested, and in front of a crowd, the freedom fighters decided to kill them with bayonets mounted on their rifles. And they are just needling them. And there were 5 or 6 photographers. 2 or 3 left the scene because they were under the belief that their presence is what made this happen the way it was happening. And the other 3 decided not to move because they said, this is happening anyhow. We have to show the reality of this situation.
And again, having the contact sheet gives you a context
Absolutely.
you would otherwise lack.
Absolutely.
Because you can see how it led up to it and afterwards.
No question. The context is context.
Yeah. And unfortunately, there is only one pair of eyes that belong to Robert Pledge.
No.
And I wish we had more.
Yeah, well, no. But the first time I did this show, really the first time, I did it in China.
How interesting. How did they react?
And the contact sheets were 10 feet by 13 and a half. And they were suspended in this amazing rundown diesel engine factory.
Oh, wow.
That was collapsing, but huge. And they were suspended. It was like entering a cathedral. The light was so incredibly beautiful. And the Chinese were blown away.
Yeah.
They were blown away because the contact sheet in China is something that didn't really exist.
They don't have the same history of photography.
Well, they have a much shorter history of photography, and then that history was interrupted on several occasions with
the Cultural
Great
Revolution.
Leap Forward and the Cultural Revolution, etc. I did a book on the Cultural Revolution based on photography, an amazing collection of photographs by a single photographer who was a newspaper photographer. Now, newspaper photographers in China, like in the United States, like in Europe, never. Don McCullin was not a newspaper photographer, but he had the same thing. They didn't use contact sheets. They edited from the negatives.
Wow.
2 reasons. Speed.
Right.
The film is processed. You look, that's the one. Okay, that's the one we're going to watch. So maybe you make a print then of that image, not the others. And the other reason in China was that paper was so expensive that you would not make contact sheets. That would be a waste.
Right.
So, of course, when they saw these contact sheets, that is not part of the history, even photographers already spoke amongst themselves about their contact sheets. Actually, what they would do, which the AP used to do and UPI used to do, they would slice up the negatives.
Right.
And therefore, the context wasn't there, even in the negative form. So if you don't have a contact sheet and you've cut up your negatives, you've lost it. You've lost it. And Magnum actually was probably the first agency that really was very conscious of this and made a point of really preserving things. We had contact with that tradition that Magnum established in 1947. And I think it is so important, and otherwise shows like this. So 10 by 13.5 feet, that's gigantic.
Amazing. It's been such a pleasure talking to you. I wish we had more time.
So do I. One more coffee, please.
Thank you, Robert. Such a pleasure.
Thank you.
And I hope people get a chance to see the exhibit and get the book, because it is mind-blowing. Now I realize how historic it is.
Yes.
I mean, it really is.
Yes.
It is capturing an era, a 40-year era that is gone. Pledge of Contact Press Images, one of the great photo editors, and a real inspiration. It was really fun to meet the photographers we met at the Nordic Light Festival, and I hope you're enjoying our little festival of interviews that Catherine and I did while we were in Norway. Our last interview, I'm sorry to say, is with one of the greatest photographers of all time, Mary Ellen Mark. She's very well known for her street photography, her photojournalism. She's done photography of all kinds. She was an on-set photographer during Apocalypse Now and many other great movies. She's had 16 collections of her work published. She's been exhibited everywhere worldwide. She's got 3 Robert F. Kennedy Journalism Awards, including one for a very famous series on Mother Teresa that she did for Life magazine in 1980. Catherine Hall interviewing Mary Ellen Mark.
All right, we're here at Christian Sun at the Opera House, and it's such an honor to have Mary Ellen Mark with us today. I've been admiring your work since I started doing... Oh, yeah, you roll your eyes. Don't date me. But since I started doing work...
It makes me feel very old, but thank you very much. I'm honored.
And I just have to say, I am... and your work here is beautiful, and...
Well, I just have a few prints.
I know, but they're ones that I've been looking at in books forever, so it's good to see them in real life. So... I have to, one of the things that fascinates you about my work, fascinates me about your work, is there seems to be a sense of darkness to it. And I want to ask you, where does that come from?
Well, I mean, I think you take pictures, the pictures reflect who you are, and maybe that's partially how I see the world, although the book that I just published on prom isn't really dark at all.
No, it's not. It's very comedic.
It's comedic. It's very touching. And my husband made a film that goes in the book, and that's really touching and really comedic also.
I love the clips from Martin's film where they basically, you're my date because I couldn't get anybody else. Quite a common answer. Yeah, so actually I didn't even go. I didn't go inside. It's a long story. But I got the photo. Anyhow, my parents don't need to know about that one. Anyhow, so what got you, when did you start shooting?
I started to take pictures when I was in graduate school. But I took pictures my whole life. As a child, I photographed all the time with a Brownie camera. When I went to camp or my friends at school.
And you're attracted to a lot, asylums and your twins and your
I did
circus.
That, but all kinds of things. I mean... when I started out taking pictures, I was a really little girl, and I would take pictures of my friends at school and always funny poses and the kind of things that children do. But when I seriously started to photograph, I was just interested in people, in all aspects of people. And I really started out as a street photographer, working on the street and just photographing life on the street, which is amazing training. And I still go out on the street and work all the time.
And were you in New York at that time?
Well... I eventually moved to New York. When I graduated from the University of Pennsylvania graduate school, at the Annenberg School, I came to New York.
And then your work, are you shooting pure documentary or are you directing your subjects?
Well, I'm shooting pure documentary, but I'm also a portrait photographer.
Yeah.
So in the portraits, more or less, some are not directed and some are directed. It depends upon what happens in front of the camera. I like to be really free. I don't like to really set up and arrange my pictures in a sense of costuming them or whatever. I like the pictures to be as natural as possible and to kind of reflect who the people are, like in the prom pictures. I mean, they're really how the people were dressed and who they were, and I kind of, because it's a Polaroid 20 by 24 camera, I wanted them to sort of just dress the way they are and be who they are, and that's what the pictures are. And some people wanted to dance in front of the camera, and some people wanted to kiss, and it's just who they were.
So you'll wait. You'll kind of put them in the environment, and you'll wait and let them just be.
But sometimes I give directions. It depends. I like to be open. I like to be
based
open.
on what the situation is
Based
at
on
hand.
the situation, but I don't like photographs that are too much about the photographer. I like pictures that are about the person.
So what does that mean when they're too much about the photographer?
I think when they're too art-directed and too styled, too art-directed, too silly.
Yeah.
I don't like them. You know, when the photographer asks the person to do something that they wouldn't normally do, I don't like that.
So there's
I think they're just
authenticity
kind of superficial.
lost.
Yeah, I like the pictures that are real. My favorite portrait photographer is Irving Penn.
Oh, yeah.
And his pictures are very real, and they're beautiful. They're complex and simple at the same time. They're beautiful.
Yes, definitely. And that's how your work is as well. You mentioned doing the 20 by 24 Polaroids.
Yeah.
I know that you use 4 by 5 and medium format and 35. But shooting portraits, how are you able to maintain that sort of natural kind of gestures that you have in your imagery, but using these big format cameras?
Well, I mean, I think you have to respect each format for what it is and what it does.
Yeah.
I mean, starting with 35 millimeter, you can be very loose and very free. You certainly can't be that loose and free with a 20 by 24 or even a 4.5. But with a 2 1/4 or a Mamiya 7, which is a camera I love, you can be pretty loose and free. You can.
And did you switch? Are you still shooting on film? Are you?
Oh, no, I'm still shooting on film.
Still shooting on film.
Yeah, film and Polaroid.
So I know a lot of your work is black and white, and I've heard you once say that you see in black and white.
I do see. I mean, I have shot color. I did a book on prostitutes in color, and sometimes I have assignments in color, and I'm happy to work in color. But my personal work, my documentary work, has most often been black and white.
And what does that mean when you say you see in black and white?
Well, I've learned to kind of see the values of tones in black and white. So when I look at you, I can analyze tonally how things would come out in a black and white picture.
Yeah.
I just see that way. And I teach. So I teach photography in Oaxaca and in Iceland. And a lot of my students photograph in color, which is absolutely fine. And a lot of them shoot digitally, which is also fine. But I sort of have the same criteria for color and for digital that I would have for analog photographs. It's about the content. That's the most important thing, is content.
Do you think color can be distracting?
No, if it's used beautifully, it's not distracting. I will say I think color is more difficult.
Yeah.
Because you have color, you have another element involved.
So why the prostitutes? Why did you shoot those in color?
Well, I actually shot them in color because I was forced to shoot them in color. But I'm glad that I had that experience. I learned a lot because it was a magazine assignment originally, and they insisted that I shoot it in color.
Oh, so that it was the
magazine itself. I would have done
itself.
black and white, yeah.
So how do you? I mean, you were shooting for life for a long time, and in these magazines where you did have a lot more control and you had a lot more time with your subjects, I imagine. What was average? When you had an assignment for life, how much time did you have?
You could have up to a month, 3 weeks, a month, and the prostitutes I spent 3 months with. That was originally for Geo, and then Stern magazine took it, but I had 3 months with them. It was a really different time. I mean, now there's so little documentary work assigned in magazines. I think simply because it does take time and they don't want to take the time. They still do stories like about war and situations like that, but I'm not a war photographer.
So when you were doing one of your first editorial projects, was it The Dam Family? That was pretty early on in your career.
I just sneezed.
Oh, go ahead.
No, I didn't. It went away.
Okay.
Anyway. The Dam Family was an assignment for life. It was in the 80s.
Oh, that was in the 80s. Okay.
Was it in the 80s? I believe it. I believe it was in the 80s, and it was in 1988, I believe. Peter Howe gave me the assignment from Life magazine, and a really good writer, Ann Fadman, went out to Los Angeles, and she found this family, and the criteria was that they had to give us total access, because I'm thinking in great documentary work, the key is access. You have to have total access. And I said, I want them to agree that we can walk into wherever they're sleeping in the middle of the night. And they agreed. And so she found another family, but it seemed okay, but this was the perfect family. So we walked in, they were in a shelter, we walked in the middle of the night and started working with them.
So you show up at 4 a.m.
It's 4 a.m., yeah.
Well, why?
Because I wanted to to know that I would have perfect access, and if anyone agreed to do that, then they were going to give me access.
So you want to know out of the gate, if there was resistance, then you knew that wasn't the right wasn't the right family. So did you spend? I imagine they probably weren't living in the greatest conditions. Did you
we followed
sleep?
them, but we spent about 10 days with them, and some days they lived in shelters, and some days they slept in the car all night. And I kept in touch with them, and then I went back in 1994 and found them again and photographed them again.
And you photographed, that was when you did the one in the bedroom, correct?
Yeah.
And you mentioned that was one of the hardest photographs you've ever taken.
It was.
Can you explain why?
Well, it has all kinds of implications, the picture.
Yeah.
About child abuse and sexual abuse of children. And I walked in because I stayed at a motel. I had an assistant with me, and we stayed at a motel down the road. And so we went very early in the morning. And we arrived there, and I walked into the bedroom, and there was this child in the bed with her stepfather and her mother. She was awake, and she just looked just ravaged. She looked so unhappy. And I knew I had to take the picture. I thought, should I take it? I knew I had to take it. I took the picture, and it was an incredible moment. It was just one of those devastating personal moments that sometimes you're witness to it as a photographer. And it was interesting. For me, I really felt there had been abuse, and I reported it to the social worker. I usually stay out of it.
Yeah.
But I had to report it, and they said, you're wrong. I asked the child if she'd been abused, and she denied it. Vehemently, she denied it. And then I said, I don't believe you, and I went to the social worker, and I complained. I said, there's something that's going on, and they said, no, you're wrong. So I published the picture, and the man in the picture was upset, not because of any implications, but because there's marijuana paraphernalia on the dresser.
So it's interesting how
he went over his head.
It's like completely.
Yeah, but a couple months later there was proven child abuse, and she actually left him. The mother left him, but
Do you feel that you potentially were a part of that?
No.
Coming to light?
No, I think she would have left him anyway. He was so abusive and physically abusive to all the kids. He was a terrible person.
So how do you go home after that?
It was pretty, it never leaves you. I think about that family all the time. And I went again to see them some years later. And they've actually, the mother is with another man who's very nice, and she's kind of straightened up her life. And unfortunately, the boy is in prison because he killed someone. But he'd never been in trouble before, but he got into a fight and somehow had a gun. So I helped find a lawyer for him, and it's a very sad story because he's a lovely boy. He never was in trouble before. It was just one of those things. And
you're attracted to that a lot, showing the underprivileged.
Well, I show the underprivileged, but I've also done. The book on twins isn't about the underprivileged.
No, not at all.
And certainly Prom is about everybody. Prom is about those that have and those that have not, but it's not in a negative way for those that have or for those that have not. It's kind of just about a cross-section of teenage culture. And the film, particularly the film is really wonderful. If you see the film, it just says it all. You look through the book and it's one level, and then you see the film and they become alive, and it's explained to you much better way, much more thorough.
What inspired this project?
My prom pictures.
Oh, okay.
But I've been photographing proms for years, and but in another way, more or less a documentary photographer. First in 35mm, then in medium format, and then I in the Day in the Life projects, I photographed a prom. That was in 1986. And then Allure magazine in 1996 gave me an assignment to photograph a girl from Pittsburgh at her prom. And then I did some things for the New Yorker at a prom. And then I thought, I started working with a 20x24 camera. I did twins, and I was thinking, what's another great project where that camera would work? And I thought, prom. It took 4 years to do it.
Oh, wow. That's a big chunk of time.
It's interesting.
So that was the latest project that you...
That's the latest
one.
Yeah.
And then can you tell me about Twins, the project, and what sort of instigated that?
With twins, because I was always interested in Twinsburg. I used to see clips on television about Twinsburg, and I thought, I'd love to go there. So I had a magazine assignment to go there. I got a magazine to send me there, and then I thought, wow, this is amazing. And then I thought, wow, this would be incredible for the Polaroid camera. So I just, I went there 2 years in a row with a Polaroid camera. Because when I looked at my pictures from the magazine assignment, I shot 4x5, I shot 35, and I shot maybe a 7. And I thought, the pictures I really like best were the 4x5. So
why? What was it about the 4x5?
The clarity of them. To photograph twins, it's really important to understand that they're twins. And you need the detail. You need to see their faces, because you need to show how much alike and how much they're not alike. Subtle.
So when you were photographing them, you chose for their gestures, their clothes. There was a lot of imitation. Was that why? What was the thought process behind that?
It was like thinking that with that big camera, to show the photographs become objects, and they're so detail oriented that you really want to show everything. So, I mean, like with Prom, you see the guy's label he wants his expensive label out on his jacket. You wouldn't see that in a smaller form.
Yeah.
With twins, you see that even if they look exactly alike, there's always a slight difference. There's one twin that's possibly a little stronger than the other.
Yeah.
One that's weaker, one that's happier, one
so
that's more miserable.
So you're controlling the exterior as much as you can with their clothes and their accessories.
No, I didn't style them.
Oh, you didn't?
They wore those.
Everyone matched?
Thinks I styled them. This was an event. Twinsburg is an event.
Oh, okay. And they just come dressed alike.
And it's for people that are devoted twins.
Oh, wow.
So they come dressed alike. So I didn't control anything except their
gestures are, though, mimicked. Was that something that you directed, or they just did that naturally?
They did that.
Oh, wow.
They're twins.
Huh. That's pretty fascinating. So with all of the work, with a lot of the documentary work, I'm curious, I know trust is obviously huge. And one of the things I think is interesting about you is you're very honest when you go to your subjects, and you tell them what your intentions are. How do you tell someone, hey, you're homeless, I want to tell your story?
Well, people that are homeless know they're homeless. You don't have to tell them that. They're well aware of their terrible situation. One of the things I realized after all these years of taking pictures is that we impose our own point of view on people. They would ordinarily think, oh, my God, that's horrible. Well, let's take Streetwise. Did you see Martin's film Streetwise?
Yeah.
That sort of came out of a story that I did for Life magazine on runaway kids in Seattle, and we think, oh my gosh, they don't have a home, but for them that's the way they live, and that's how they live, and even with the prostitutes in India, when I brought them books, showed them the pictures, that's how they live, and we can impose our feelings about how they live and how bad it is, but for them it's how they live. So
when you brought to India, what was the reception?
Photographing prostitutes in India, they knew they're prostitutes. I don't have to say, hey, you're a prostitute. They know they're a prostitute. Or, hey, you're homeless. Or, hey, this is bad or that's bad. I mean, they know that.
So what do they get out of it?
What do they get out of it? I think in a way that's a very good question, because I always feel very guilty because they don't get as much out of it as they should. But they get out of it attention, or people feel recognition from, even if it's just from me, the fact that their lives are worth documenting.
Important, yeah.
Well, worth documenting. That's just something, that to know that someone's interested in them and looking at them and their lives are worth documenting. I do feel they're worth documenting. So that's basically what they get out of it. It's much more difficult now is to get the kind of access that I've gotten in the past. First of all, because people they realize the power of media, and they realize, and also because of the internet, you can't be anonymous anymore. People are so afraid they're going to go up on the internet and everyone's going to know they're a prostitute, or everyone's going to know where they are. So it's more complex now.
Well, there's that, and then there's also, like you said, the funding has just dramatically decreased.
Yeah. Well, magazines aren't interested in they're more interested in celebrity, or they're more interested in fashion or things like that.
Yeah. One of my other favorite images of yours is the And the one in Appalachia with I think she's 9 years old or something, smoking a cigarette. Is it in Appalachia?
Amanda and her cousin Amy.
Exactly. Can you tell me about that image?
That picture was done. The picture of Amanda and her cousin Amy was done on one of my last assignments for Life magazine when it was still Life magazine. It was. They never published that story. It was a story on problem children, and I'm really looking for Amanda. Because I like to go back and find people some years later. I'd love to find her. I tried everything to find her. I couldn't find her. But we did a story, Problem Children, and we went, I think it's Valdez, North Carolina, is where it was taken. And we went there, and there was like a school for problem children, and I found her there. She was really interesting. I followed her home one day. She sort of saw that I was on the bus with her, and she ran out. She ran down in the woods, and I followed her. And I couldn't figure out what's she doing. Why is she running away? And she was actually running in the woods to have a cigarette. She was 9. So then I asked her mother if I could come home with her, and went home with her, like that weekend, or when she wasn't going to school. And she was like, she really pushed her mother around. It was almost funny, And she had cigarettes and everything she wanted at home. So she was always smoking cigarettes, and she got all dressed up, and she put on makeup and her false fingernails. She was so excited to have a picture taken, like a photo session. But then at the end of the day, I was leaving. I wasn't so pleased with what I got with the pictures. I thought I didn't really get anything interesting. I packed up my camera, so I was leaving, and she wasn't around. And I said to her mother, "Where's Amanda?" And she said, "She's out by the pool." And the little baby pool.
Yeah.
Baby pool. One of those little blow pools.
Yeah.
So I went out to say goodbye, and I just had my Leica around my neck. So, and there she was. She was standing up in the pool with her false, I think she has her false fingernails. She was smoking a cigarette, and then her cousin Amy was like in the pool. And I was 2 frames. I just grabbed her.
That was it.
That was the picture. And all day long I'd worked so hard, kind of having a directed photo session with her, and the pictures weren't very good. But here she was, as she normally was, just standing there smoking in the pool.
The gesture is just fabulous, right?
Perfect.
Just the natural.
That's how things happen.
Yeah.
You never know.
What's the name of the image with the black veil?
Tiny.
Tiny, yeah.
Well, that was during Streetwise. Actually, most of the pictures that I took from the runaway kids in Seattle were done during the assignment. But when Martin made the film, I took a couple images. It was hard because he was shooting, but I jumped in and took a couple. And that was during Halloween. There's going to be a Halloween party. It was the end of the film, and she was all dressed up, and she wanted to dress like a prostitute. So she put on this hat with a veil, and she had a little dress on. And that was just taken right at her house. I mean, I didn't think... It's funny about that picture because people really love that picture. For me, it's almost like a fashion picture.
Oh, I wouldn't even get that for a second.
Really?
Yeah, it feels very authentic.
Really? Well, it's just, I took a picture of her with a hat and a veil. It's amazing the pictures that become iconic, and you don't know why.
Yeah, do you know?
No, it's a mystery. I don't know.
Do you have ones that you think must be and then it isn't?
Really, that's what the whole purpose of becoming a photographer. For me, my purpose is to try and make images that are iconic, that are going to last forever. And some do and some don't. And it's mysterious, the ones that do.
Yeah.
Well, one I knew when I took the elephant.
Which was that?
Truck, I knew that was going to be a really powerful.
Yeah, that was
the circus. I knew that was
phenomenal.
But I mean, the other side of it, I thought Amanda was going to be just a cute image. I didn't realize people seem to like that image a lot. It's funny. She was funny. I want to find her. So, Amanda, if you're looking at this, contact me. Email me. Go on my Facebook. You can get my email.
Yeah, there you go. It's one thing that I find fascinating is of all your work, and I know you've done some work of celebrities as well, and you've talked about, but it all has, I mentioned at the beginning of the interview, this sort of you get into people's soul, and there's sort of
it used to be easier with celebrities because when I first started working on film sets, I do a lot of work, and I enjoy working on film sets. It's fascinating. You see brilliant people work, great cinematographers and great directors and great actors. You watch them work, and I've learned a lot about how to do portraits from just looking at these people work. Great costume designers, all of that. I mean, it's I've seen the best work. But you used to be able to go on a film set and just make documentary pictures, which is what I love to do. they don't really want those kind of pictures anymore because there are no more magazines that want that. They want more studio portraiture.
Yeah.
They do. So it's very... I did a book with those pictures, but it's very difficult now because they'll hire you just to do the... Although I worked on a film with director Park, a Korean director, and sometimes on Tim Burton's films, I mean, he welcomes me on the set when I'm working also. So I can try and grab things. But you used to be able to go for like a month and just take pictures, like on Apocalypse, just take pictures on the set.
Yeah. But I mean, even back in those days, even the celebrity stuff, there is a sort of complexity to them. And there is,
you had more access
I think, for myself, I think anytime you have duality, dark and beauty and things, well, a lot of your work has that, whether it's celebrities and that must come from you.
Well, I think with the celebrities, earlier on it was easier. They were more relaxed. But that business has changed to it's controlled more.
Okay.
It's controlled more. So it's harder. But you just try and make good pictures. I mean, basically, I just try and make a really good picture. Certain actors have a real edge to them that is just naturally, like Johnny Depp. He has an incredible edge.
Yeah, easy to...
And he knows how to be photographed.
So
Marlon Brando had that edge. They just have that.
We have to conclude, but I wanted to ask you one question.
Yeah.
I hear you have a lot of robots.
I like robots. Do you like them too?
I never actually... We have one robot in our house. But why do you collect robots?
I don't know. I like robots. I have some robots. I love dogs. I don't have a real dog. I even have do you remember when they made those robotic dogs?
No, yeah.
I have those.
We have those too.
But, yeah.
Well, thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks. Thank you.
Mary Ellen and Christensen.
Amazing photographer, Mary Ellen Mark. In fact, all of our photographers at the Nordic Light Festival were fantastic. We thank Morten Krogvold, James Mollison, Bruce Davidson, Greg Gorman, Robert Pledge, and Mary Ellen Mark. If you didn't see last week's episode, please do download it and watch. And, of course, download all our episodes if you can. We do TWiT Photo every Tuesday afternoon at 1:30 Pacific, 4:30 Eastern Time, 21:30 UTC on twit.tv. But the best way to watch is to download it and watch. And do get the video because, as always with our photographers, we like to show the images they're talking about. So it really is a great way to listen to what they're talking about and then watch those images that they're mentioning. And thanks to Odinga. I know, in fact, everybody is watching at the house, the House of Photography in Christensen at the Nordic Light Festival. Thank you for inviting us. Catherine and I had such a blast in Norway, meeting these great photographers, listening to the talks, seeing the incredible exhibits that you mounted, and just getting to know Norway a little bit better. We really thank you for bringing us out there. I hope you've enjoyed our visit to Christensen. Next week, Catherine Hall's back with another great photographer. We'll do what we always do. We'll talk to them about their art, their work, their technique, and show their images. It's so much fun. Thanks for joining us. We'll see you next time on TWiT Photo.